And so this week we're going to pick up and in chapter 2. We're not going to, this says 2 and 3 because I'm going to use this, I'm just going to continue to add to this presentation for all the churches, all 7 of the churches. But we're only going to cover the first 2 today. So we're only going to do chapter 2 verses 1 through 11, I believe. But we got a couple of strong messages here to the churches. Each one of these churches gets a strong message. And, we remember in the last chapter that John saw Jesus. But did he look like the Jesus that he knew? No, he didn't. He looked like the glorified Jesus that was glowing and had feet like bronze and a sword coming from his mouth. And when he spoke, it was very thunderous, like, some translations call it like the ocean waves crashing and or waterfall or stuff like that. So, and he was standing amongst some candlesticks or lampstands. Now, what were the candlesticks? What did they represent?
7 churches.
Very good. All right. So, and the churches were all in Southeast Asia. There's my mouse. They were all in Southeast Asia. This isn't exactly the clearest of pictures, but they all kind of go in a pattern. They start with Ephesus and they go all the way around to Laodicea. And then, of course, over here we have the GNCC. No, the Aegean Sea. So, but anyways, it just means you need to be here every week so that you understand all the craziness that happens. So, but I said Aegean Sea last week and somebody thought I said GNC. So, Yeah, so, supplying vitamins to the first century apostles. So, yeah, there you go. But we see these churches here, and those are the churches that we'll be talking about. So today we're going to talk about Ephesus and Smyrna. This one here and that one there. And those would be the first 2 that would have started out on this pathway. And this messenger would have been able to start with Ephesus and go up and around and come down to Laodicea, or however you say it, Laodicea or whatever. But they're all going to get messages. They're going to get letters. Okay. Some things about the churches here. Okay. Some people believe that each church represents a period of time in church history. Like Ephesus would be 1st century. And then Smyrna would be starting at 100 AD to like 300 or something like that, depending on what was going on, what the letter was addressed in each thing. And that, when we started before talking about it, before the pandemic, I was talking about it and but the more I've studied it, the more I see it, I don't know, it's very hard to make that stretch. There's a lot of similarities between some of these letters and what's happened in church history over the years, between people in power persecuting the church and then also people in power, blessing the church and supporting the church and stuff like that. But there's no indication in the Bible anywhere that it's a prophecy of church history. The real more actual case of this is that these 7 churches we know physically existed during this time period, but that there were more than just these 7. There was a lot more than just these 7. They had set up churches just about anywhere they could, and just like now, we got more than 7 churches here in town here, and so we know that there was more than 7 churches, but these churches are a representation of all churches that exist, that have existed and that exist now. If you were to go and once we study these letters, you could probably, if you were to go and visit all the churches in Lancaster County, I'm sure that you could find 7 churches that match these, criteria of each church. And that's more what this is. This is more of these 7 churches were picked because they covered everything. Some were doing well under the persecution, some were not. And we're going to see that in some of these letters. You know, some had done a lot of great things, and some were just really, really, you know, Jesus struggled to find anything nice to say about them, that they were that bad. And so that's what's going on today in our world, and that's what's gone on since the first century. So this is more the case, and so we're going to focus on that. And like I said, and the other thing that I was reading about the whole church history thing is that while this may apply to churches in the West, in our area, just like now, we have the freedom here to preach and to assemble and to, you know, talk about the Word of God. That's not the case for churches around the world. Not every Christian church in the world can do that. There are people being martyred and killed, martyred every day and persecuted every day and tortured and for their faith. And so so you can't, the last letter talks about how it's a plentiful, it's a good time, and, you know, but we'll get more into that, but it talks about that there's a lot of freedom in a church, but that's not the case. So if it's a church age, we may have it here, but that's not the case everywhere. So you can't really apply a church age to these if it doesn't apply to like all the churches. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, I mean, even right now we're seeing that our neighbor to the north is trying to stop churches from assembling under COVID. They're shutting down churches and putting them in jail, putting the pastors in jail if they assemble their churches. And that's going on in Canada right now. It's not as bad. It's kind of toning down a little bit, but it has been going on. And so, just like they were threatening to do to John MacArthur's church in California, here, they wanted to stop that back last year or whatever. They were threatening to arrest him, come in and take him out of the middle of the service and arrest him. I don't believe they ever did, but that's what they were threatening. But they actually have done it in churches. They have gone and put up chain link fence around the churches to keep the people out.
I caught the COVID news here of Gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, first missile that was fired into Ukraine, that solved our COVID problem here in America. You know.
Fauci, he must have been on that missile.
Yeah. So,
I would
wait.
pay to see that.
So, but anyways, but yeah, so, and there's another situation. We got to be in prayer for, you know, that we know there's Christians there, and we got to be in prayer for them because they're really, you know, having a tough time of it right now. So, but yeah, so this is just a representation of all churches, and we're gonna look and see each letter, or just about each letter has good stuff that they're doing. Where is it? Yeah, the churches, 5 of the churches are commended for doing some things. Wait a minute. 6 of the churches are praised for doing some good things that they're doing. 5 of the churches are told that there's some things that need to change. And then the churches are given a command to follow. All the churches are given a command to follow for the future and a specific reward to those that do follow. And so this, and also included in a lot of the letters, is warnings as to what will happen if they don't follow the command that Jesus is about to give them. So each one has an important thing, and we need to look at these churches and make sure that the church that we have lines up with the ones that are doing the most good and the most right at the time. And so and work towards that, and you know, take the advice, take the commands that the Lord gives all the churches and apply it to our lives and our church as well. So, and this also could pretty well, you know, this also represents the types of Christians too, because it's not just the church that's like that. It's you got Christians that act the same way that it's described in these letters, And so, you know, and you got some that are really committed and focused and out doing everything, and then you got some that are just, you know, carnal Christians that are just living like they did when they were in the world. And that's some of the churches we're gonna see here at some point. So we're gonna get going here. We're gonna get rolling, and it is we're gonna look in the first 7 verses of chapter 2, which is the first church here, which is at Ephesus. Okay, and so let's go ahead and read that now. It says here, "Write this letter to the angel of the church in Ephesus. This is a message from the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who walks among the 7 gold lampstands. I know all the things you do. I have seen your hard work and your patient endurance. I know you don't tolerate evil people. You have examined the claims of those who say they are apostles but are not. You have discovered they are liars. You have patiently suffered for me without quitting. But I have this complaint against you. You don't love me or each other as you did at first. Look how far you have fallen. Turn back to me and do the works you did at first. If you don't repent, I will come and remove your lampstand from its place among the churches. But this is in your favor. You hate the evil deeds of the Nicolaitans, just as I do. Anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he is saying to the churches. To everyone who is victorious, I will give fruit from the tree of life in the paradise of God." All right. So, church at Ephesus. This is a church that had rich history. Paul wrote a letter to this church. Does anybody know what we call that letter? It's a book of the Bible. Anybody know which one it is?
Ephesians?
Very good. All right.
Yeah, Ephesus actually is a church today, as far as that's the same church that they've had since their original times.
Most of the city is in ruins, but you're right. I believe
there is
there
still
is
a church that they
a
go
church
to.
that- yeah.
It's not, like you said, it's not like it was.
Right. So, but yeah, most
There
of
is a church there.
most of this city is kind of gotten to be in ruins, but there is still some part of it left. So apparently the church has withstood. So, but yeah, but Paul wrote the book of Ephesians as a letter to the church at this time. Paul spent a bunch of time there and the church was really strong. When Paul was there, the entire area had heard the gospel of Jesus, and many had responded. In fact, this city was known it had a temple for the god Artemis, and this city worshipped this god quite a bit, and there was quite a few silversmiths that were in this area that made statues of this god and sold them. And when Paul was there, the effect that Paul had on the church and the movement of God and everything there was so great that the silversmiths rose up against Paul and wanted him killed because he was hurting their business, because so many people were turning away from worshiping the god of Artemis that they weren't selling their craft anymore as much. And so they were suffering, and they wanted Paul, and I believe they drove Paul out of the city. And so, the church was doing really good. And then there was a period of time where even the Apostle John, which, by the way, speaking of John, John's tomb is in Ephesus.
Really?
Yes.
No, they had a grave
But it
in
could-
Ephesus that is John.
But it could be another John.
No,
Daniel,
not another John.
All right, that's it. I'm putting it in the slideshow next week. I found a picture of it. I seen it. So, yep, that is in Ephesus. So, anyways,
Imposter.
imposter. Yeah.
There's a lot of
I think what happened is that he got too old for them on Patmos, and they sent him over to Ephesus 96 AD.
Yeah.
In 96 AD, and he lived out the rest of his life there, and
Right.
has a grave there with a gravestone there.
You're still in bud.
I will say this, okay? While I was kind of looking at this, poking around, and she looked at it too, while we were kind of looking around at this, we did not see anywhere in the research that believes the same thing as you, that he is still alive
No.
on this earth.
Okay, yeah, he's not on this earth. There are some people that highly claim that he was taken away, like the chariot with Elijah. Was it Elijah? Is
Yeah,
that who it was?
Elijah and
Yeah,
Enoch.
but he was taken away, or like
Taken
how
to
God
heaven.
took Moses up the mountain and never saw Moses again.
All I can
But,
say
you
is
know.
repeat Jesus, and he said, "What is it to you if I let him live forever?"
Okay. Right. And you know what that means? MYOB. Peter, MYOB. Mind your own business. I got a plan for him. I got a plan for you. Okay? He didn't deny me. You denied me. You're going to suffer. No, I mean, so, okay. But, right. He just said that, but, you know. So, let me quote the words of Jesus. Jody, what is it to you if John gets to live forever? Okay? But doesn't mean he gets to live forever here. I did not see where anybody but Jody believes that he's alive walking the earth 2,000 years later. Okay? Yes, there's a lot of theories out there. Yes, there's, you know.
There are a lot of theories.
But there's the tomb. The most common popular beliefs are that he died at old age in Ephesus and he's buried there. And also there's belief by some scholars in the 3rd or 4th century that came about that he was ascended into heaven like
He was
Elijah.
taken up, yeah.
So, you know, in any case. And so, in that case, he wouldn't have died. He would be, yeah. In that case, he wouldn't have died. He would have, but he's still not walking the earth.
Well, he did at one time.
Yeah, but not now.
Just saying.
Not 2,000 years later. So, anyways,
He's what Elvis.
I'm, yeah.
Elvis,
Bigfoot.
Y'all talk about
Yeah.
that, I think about how people think Elvis is still here.
Elvis is still
Yeah,
alive.
yeah. So, anyways, but I know that didn't clear anything up for you, but, you know,
I've heard it all.
yeah. I know you have. So, but anyways. So, but getting back to this, John served this church as pastor at one point in time as well. In fact, I believe this is where he was when they came and got him and tried to kill him and persecute him and ended up putting him on the island. He was working, serving the church in Ephesus as leader here. And so this church has a lot of rich history. If you got Paul that's been there ministering to them, and you got the Apostle John that's been there ministering to them, then, you know, this church has a lot of history. But, so, and that's what he's saying here, okay? He says, I know the works you've done. Okay, he's talking about how the work that this church has worked hard. This church has done a lot of good things for God. They have ministered to a lot of people. They've endured under trials that have come. They've fought hard against people that have tried to be false prophets and lead everybody astray. You know, there was many that came. And while we don't know exactly all that was happening in the church, we do know that the people were standing strong against what wasn't right, and they were standing strong in favor of what was right, and that they were doing the work of God. Okay? The Nicolaitans are mentioned here in verse 6. Jesus hates it, says that he doesn't hate them, but he hates the evil deeds. But this is in your favor. You hate the evil deeds of the Nicolaitans just as I do. Okay? There's a lot of controversy about this. Okay? We don't know exactly what this is, what these people were doing. There's a big belief that because one of the first deacons was a man named Nicholas, that he at some point started, either he himself or people got led astray by him and some of the things that he was doing. A lot of people believe that what happened here with these people, the Nicolaitans, is that they basically set up what we see now is the separation between clergy and regular lay people, just general people like us. And that they set themselves as higher, took like the apostles and made them higher and whatever and everything. And whereas the apostles always were servants, they considered themselves servants of God. These people didn't do it that way. They would call themselves servants, but it was kind of like they set up something similar to what the Pharisees and the Sadducees had, in that they were better than everybody else, and that this is what, we know that this still exists. Maybe I need some GNC, but this still exists in some denominations or faiths or whatever you want to say today. And that was one of the things, that's one of the beliefs that this is talking about. Another is that they would just lead, that's the most common belief. Another one is that they were just leading people astray, that they were, their lives, they were carnal Christians, they were leading lives of just living for the world and not, but yet they were still trying to lead the church. And so that there was idolatry and so.
But that's what they did. They took the Artemis in Ephesus, that temple, and turned it into a Christian, meeting place or whatever. All the destruction happened. But we got that whole, let's build a statue of all the apostles in our church,
right,
and worship them and say, please, St. Paul, play for me. Or please, Mary, play for me. That's where a lot of that started.
Right.
Is during that part of the early church.
Right. And so that's where they think that this really took root. And that's, like I said, that's the most popular and common belief here in that. Okay. So this is a hard-working church. They have resisted. They have done well in a lot of areas. But we see that Jesus does have a complaint against them. In verse 4, he says, but I have this complaint against you. Okay? They were working hard, but why they were working was wrong. It is just as important for us to have the correct reason for working as it is for the actual work. We should be working and doing things for God because we love God and we love Him, and He's done so much for us that we want to do for Him, and not out of obligation. These people's hearts had grown cold, and they had kind of turned. God does not want robots down here doing the work. If He wanted robots, He could have created robots. Okay, He's got the angels that do His bidding for Him, and they even, there's a lot of talk about how much choice the angels have. Obviously, they have some because some rebelled, but there's a lot of talk about how much they actually have choice and freedom and whatever. They don't have nearly as much as we do to choose, but they do obviously choose to do what He tells them to do, or they would fall too.
It's been explained to me like they're soldiers.
Okay.
Because
yeah,
you know how our soldiers are. Yeah, they still have free will, but they also have orders.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they choose to carry They choose to carry out the orders.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably a good analogy there. So, but He wants people. He created us in His own image, and He wants us to have a closeness with Him. Our love for God should be the first thing, love and most important relationship in our lives, above our love for our kids, above our love for our parents, above our love for our spouse, and I do feel I need to say this, above our love for our pets. Because some people love their pets so much that I mean, hey, I love my pets. And I enjoy their company and whatever, but our love for God should be more important than anything else in our lives. And these people had lost that. They were doing the work of God still. They were still carrying on, but they weren't doing it out of love. They were doing it out of obligation. And so it just became routine. It was a routine for them. They just did it. They just went through the motions. Okay? And some churches today go through this, and it might get to the point where, as generations come and go in a church, if we don't teach the generations behind us the love for God, and that's the reason why we do it, then it might get to be that when these generations come up, because the others have died off, they don't even know why they're doing it. And then you get well, we've always done it like this. Well, that's not the way to go about serving the Lord. And so, if we're not careful, we get, it's like the Israelites. Once they got into the promised land, they conquered the promised land. And then, but as those generations died off, that generation died off and more came, and the further it went along, a lot of people didn't know. Got away from the commandments and got away from, the things that they were supposed to be doing for God. And a lot of that was because they didn't know why. And so, and churches go through that. So that's what this church was dealing with here, is that they had lost their love for God. And he's telling them to return. And he says, anybody that returns, and now, let me also qualify this, each of these churches, he's generalizing the church and generalizing that this church is doing that. It doesn't mean everybody in the church is doing that. Okay, you got good people, faithful, hardworking, true, faithful relationship people in each church, okay? And he's saying here that anybody who either is doing that, anybody who hears and listens to the Spirit and understand what he's saying. And, he's telling them to, he tells the ones that need to repent, and he's telling the ones that have been faithful to keep doing what you're doing. And if you're victorious, you will eat from the tree of life. Now, what's the tree of life? Well, I know we all know that. What's the tree of life?
You live forever.
Yeah. We saw it in Genesis in the garden. It was the tree that Adam and Eve ate the fruit from. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
That's not the same tree.
You're right. That's not the same tree. I'm
There's
sorry,
a
but
tree.
there was a tree in there that they got to eat from.
Tree of life.
Yeah, they got to eat from. You're right. My bad. They got to eat from this tree. Adam and Eve got to eat from this tree, and so that they would live and have relationship and have a closeness with God forever. When we get to heaven, those that persevere, he's saying, will get to eat from that tree. If you have a love for God that's above all else here on earth, then you will get to eat from that tree in heaven.
Right.
And that's what he's saying there. So,
But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
that tree was very important when we fell, when Adam and Eve fell. If they hadn't kicked us out of Eden, and we have eaten out of that tree of good for life, then we would be in our sins for eternity.
Exactly.
And there would have been no way for us to be reconciled with God.
And that's the reason we had to be banished.
So we don't
at that point.
We don't get that tree.
No, not now. Right. So
it was a good thing that we got kicked out.
Right. And what a privilege it'll be to eat from that tree in heaven for eternity. Okay? So this letter closes and talks about, and God should be first in our lives, and we should be working for him because we want to instead of because we have to. Those are the big takeaways from this letter here to this church. Okay? All right, next we're going to do the next one, Smyrna. This is a real short one. It's only 3 verses long. It's verse 8 through 11. Let me pull it up here.
It always confuses me that all the letters are written to the angel of the church.
Right. Who's the angel? We talked about that a little bit last week. Who's the angel of the church? Angel, in some cases, was used as messenger. So it would be the leader of the church. They address it to the messenger, the pastor, the leader, whatever they were calling him at that time. Here they address it as angel, but yes, the angels were considered messengers a lot of times because they brought, like Gabriel brought the message to Mary. They would come and bring a message to somebody a lot of times. And so it's basically a messenger is what the meaning of that translates over to. So it would be the leader or the pastor or whatever you want to call it. It would be, like Tommy was here. Tommy would be the angel of this church.
Angels in Great Falls.
Exactly. So, sometimes the angels have to move. So, but anyways, so verse 8 through 11. So, you good? Okay. All right. Write this letter to the angel of the church in Smyrna. This is the message from the one who is first and last and who was dead but is now alive. I know about your suffering and your poverty, but you are rich. I know the blasphemy of those opposing you. They say they are Jews, but they are not, because their synagogue belongs to Satan. Don't be afraid of what you are about to suffer. The devil will throw some of you into prison to test you. You will suffer for 10 days, but if you remain faithful, even when facing death, I will give you the crown of life. Anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he is saying to the churches. Whoever is victorious will not be harmed by the second death. Okay, Smyrna, further up on the sea here. Ephesus was here, Smyrna's there. It's a seaport city, as you can see. Ephesus was a seaport one, that's a seaport one. It's a seaport city. It was a rich city. This city still exists. I don't know that it's called Smyrna these days, but this city is still here. It's in Turkey, and as all these are, okay? This city was very, very rich, very, very well-to-do, okay? A big thing that they had here was myrrh. Anybody know about myrrh?
Yes, that burial stuff.
It's fragrance, right?
Yeah.
Anybody remember where else myrrh is talked about in the Bible?
Wise man brought it to Jesus.
That's right. The wise men brought it to Jesus. It's very valuable. And this city had a lot of it. And so they were very, very rich. Okay? But the name of the city actually means bitter. And so the church was suffering persecution here. Not just by the Romans, but by the Jews that were here as well. We're getting it from, and in some places the Jews and the Christians didn't get along, and this was definitely one of them. Okay? There was a large Jewish population in this city. And the synagogue, that they had, the synagogue here, Jesus calls it the synagogue of Satan. How bad you gotta be to be called the church of Satan, or the synagogue of Satan? Okay? Being Jewish was an approved religion by Rome, so they were protected by the Roman government and they were allowed to practice it. The Christian religion, being a Christian, was not approved. And so the Jewish leaders were hard on the Christians as well as the government. So these people were suffering financially, they were suffering physically, they were suffering emotionally because a lot of stuff was being said. As he said, I know the ones that have been lying, blasphemy, and the ones that have been lying about you, those that oppose you, all that stuff. And so Jesus is comforting them and telling them that he knows about their suffering. But then he tells them it's not going to end for a while. The church is told to continue to endure the suffering that comes. And if they do, they will receive the crown of life. But he also tells them that while they're poor here, and these Christians lived in a lot of poverty because they were excluded from being able to work and do things that they needed to do, that they were rich in eternal blessings. Now, what would you rather have? I mean, we all want blessings, we all work hard to live and survive here, but would you rather have tons and tons of riches here and blessings, or would you rather have eternal blessings? That's kind of where I'm at. He mentions 10 days here. Now again, we said that there was a lot of symbolism in this book. This is not a literal 10 days. Doesn't mean that it's going to end in 10 days from now. Okay? 10 days, and we see it a lot in the Bible, and I didn't put it up here because I was kind of out of room. But I do have it here, and I can, if you guys want, I got some references here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 different references in my notes here, and I put some notes up in the box up there in the vestibule if you want to look at it, where period of time is used in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. 10 days, is used to describe a period of time. It's kind of like we would say, in a little while, I'm going to do this. That would be what we would say now. They said 10 days. In 10 days, I'm going to do this. But it didn't actually mean 10 literal days. It meant, in a little while, I'm going to do this. And so they were going to suffer for more, for a period of time. But the thing to take heart for these people is that the suffering was going to end. It wasn't going to go on for eternity. It wasn't going to go on forever. That it was going to end. Okay? God is telling these people to continue to endure for the remainder of time that's outlined, that they would be rich with blessings in heaven, including the crown of life. That'd be cool, the crown of life. So, there may come a time where we have to kind of apply these words. A lot of people say, why does God allow suffering? Well, sometimes it's to help people understand their need for God better. Sometimes one person suffers so that somebody else can understand their need for God. But we got to remember that God is faithful, and it's not going to last forever. It's going to be for a little while. And yes, it may cost us our earthly life at some point, but if it does, then we will have the crown of life in eternity for heaven, in heaven with Him. So there may come a point in time where we start having to rely on the message in this letter. We're starting to see a lot of rumblings now about that we're intolerant. It's the word I think they use for our beliefs. If we stand strong to our beliefs, we're going to be viewed as intolerant more and more and more and more. And at some point in time, there may be persecution. We might not have the freedom we have to meet like we do and stuff. Pray it doesn't happen. But
I am intolerant of certain things.
Exactly. So, but so we may end up at a point where we're kind of suffering like these people are, and that we're suffering financially, we're suffering socially, we're suffering physically, a lot of different ways we're suffering, and we may even be persecuted and killed for our faith. And so this is a letter to encourage people walking through that. And this church was suffering, but notice he doesn't say any negatives about this. He doesn't say you need to improve on this. Complaints against them, none. There's none. Oh yeah, and the other thing, these people, if they hold true, are not going to face the second death, which we will get to talk about at the end of the book. So, and I think Pastor Joe mentioned something about the second death last week too when he spoke. But yeah, so we just got to remain faithful, and this is a letter to this church to continue to remain faithful, and it's not gonna last forever. So, questions, comments, thoughts? We got to wrap it up.
If I'm ever persecuted and killed, I know what I'm gonna say.
What's that?
You may kill me once, but you won't kill me twice.
There you go. That's right.